So Reid, as some of you may know, the company he founded, LinkedIn, recently filed to go public. So he is no longer allowed to look forward, only sideways, upwards. So we're talking today about one of these bigger picture topics that Reid has been working on as a thesis, which is the idea of the next big thing on the web being data. And I guess as soon as someone came up with this highly marketable idea of having Web 2.0, the question was, what's going to be Web 3.0? There's a lot of people fighting for that title, and Reid recently became one of them. So tell us a little bit about your ideas.
Well, there's been a long laundry list of candidates for what one might think of what is Web 3.0, and it's completely uninteresting from a viewpoint of semantic categorization, but it is interesting from a viewpoint of innovation and invention. And it's really kind of like where will the great new applications be built, kind of what's the foundational elements of them that will be part of how we change hundreds of millions of people's lives, maybe even billions of people's lives. And the progression, I think, goes something like this, which is Web 1 is search for files, HTML, PDF, et cetera, download them, where interactivity was this strange place we go in cyberspace. Web 2 is applications based on your real name. So on Web 1.0, when you went to an AOL chat room or something, you were an anime fan or, San Francisco, cafe goer or something like that. And in Web 2, you're actually Reid Hoffman or, your real identity, your real relationships. And I think what Web 3 comes out of, because the most interesting of all the candidates that went forward is mobile, but it's kind of obvious, like mobile's transforming the world. We always have it in our pocket, except when we're on stage. And, but what's interesting about it is I think that the platform part of it will be data. It's data that we generate explicitly, like putting into social networking platforms or blogs or tweets. It's data that we generate implicitly, turning on our phone in a location or checking in even, and then data that it's analyzed. And what I wanted to do by throwing my hat into this race was not so much try to join the race or win the race as much as to focus on this is where some massive innovation will happen that will transform our lives.
So just having data doesn't mean much, right? What are some examples of things that would fit into your ideas? Is this something already people are already doing? Is this just mashups? We've had these around for quite a while.
Well, so there's been actually data mashups for a long time, even back to when people are assembling, for example, credit scores or a quantum equivalent. What's different here is that everyone is now a participant in what is sometimes called the data exhaust, where you are producing information one way or the other, and that production on a mass basis can now be mashed up in these kind of much more fundamental ways. So like one of the things that, an interesting example, there's an Israeli company called Waze that essentially everyone turns this app on a mobile phone. It tracks where you're going, kind of your location and your velocity, and creates an instant traffic map. A couple weeks ago, Google announced Route-Around, which is that with Android and Latitude Plus integrating in traffic data. And it's those kinds of data sources that enable platforms that now benefit individual consumers, because partially before on most of these data mashups, they weren't actually features built for you. They were features built for businesses that were doing like direct marketing analysis or that sort of thing. These things are actually how do we navigate the world, and that's what I think is part of what's new.
Okay, so when people are contributing data, they're also getting something back for it.
Yes. Well, and the applications that we use, like that benefit us, will be based on there will be new kinds of categories of applications based on the data, and it's happening already, although I think it'll happen a lot more in the next 5 years.
And is this the kind of thing where you participate in something, you're on Facebook, you're posting your status message, you're saying on Foursquare where you are at any one time, or you're an investor in Gowalla, right? I have to mention Gowalla. You're posting where you are, and you're doing that just for your purpose, and then sometime at some later date, someone figures out a use for this data that's informative, or is it a more direct relationship?
I think it depends on the specific, and like always with innovation, it'll depend on the specific idea of pulling several different sorts of data sorts together. So I'll give you a blended one, which is, people establish profiles on LinkedIn as a way of saying, here's my professional, CV. Like, here's where I've been, here's what I've done, etc. Well, we went through and produced this thing called LinkedIn Skills, which was initial analysis of the 100 million people who are on LinkedIn, and then we mashed it up with Wikipedia, because the Wikipedia mashup gave us an ability to say, well, which of these skills are particularly important? We had our own scoring analysis that came out of LinkedIn profiles, but also, like, what's the skills graph look like? Because we have a graph that we're assuming based on that, and most people weren't thinking we were going to create a skills graph, right? So that's what they weren't inputting the data in order to get a skills graph. They were inputting the data in order to say, this is what I'm good at. But by doing a 100 million analytic pattern there, and by taking Wikipedia, we are able to say, well, by the way, here is what an identity of skills are, and if these are skills you put on your profile, here are other skills that maybe you have and haven't remembered to put on your profile, or maybe these are skills that you might want to build. And then we begin to mash that up with other kinds of data that we have within LinkedIn, e.g., which skills are trending. So like Hadoop is massively growing in terms of people's ability to do it. And the skills are the whole range. I mean, there's not just like skills that we would all be familiar with, Java, Hadoop, angel investing, but, ballet dancing and everything else in that. And it's a way of seeing like which regions, actually I didn't look at which companies, ballet dancing, but there's probably an analysis on the LinkedIn Skills that say this for that. And so that is what, it isn't exactly what the users were intending, but it's something that massively benefits them.
So it's pretty easy, though, to get Wikipedia to allow you to use their data.
Yep.
But in a lot of cases, this might involve two different data sets that are owned by different companies.
Yep.
And they're based on users contributing them. So how do you negotiate all that ownership?
Well, I think part of what you do, I think there's going to be a range of open to closed data, and it's not just, everyone almost always jumps to that it is economic considerations. Actually, frequently, it's also don't ambush your users, right? Like, for example, one of the reasons why we don't just publish the aggregate set of all the LinkedIn data is because we don't produce organization charts, right? And our individual members would feel ambushed if we produced organization charts.
So even though the information is there, you don't show it in aggregate.
Yeah, we don't show it in that way because, and we don't even construct it internally, because I think one of the really important things is you never, good internet companies never ambush their users.
But they always do.
Good internet companies do not ambush their users. Right. There are internet companies that ambush.
Good internet companies.
Yes. Well, I think that's one of the important principles of data goodness. And so, what I think happens is you have this range between open and closed. There's various mechanisms by which it's not just open or closed. So, for example, through APIs, when individual members kind of join a service, like, so for example, there were some things launched on LinkedIn, like CubeDuel and so forth, that said, okay, which of these people did you like to work with more? Well,
that was something that was developed outside.
Yeah, developed outside, and using LinkedIn APIs and LinkedIn data, because when a user logs in and says, okay, I want to play this, then we say, okay, fine. This service can then pull your specific data and can use it to generate a value proposition for you.
But you shut that down, right? Or
we didn't shut it down.
No? Okay, so that's okay for people to do that?
Well, it's okay. We looked at it very carefully because we wanted to make sure that our users weren't going to get ambushed by this third party. But then it looked fine, so we let it go.
Okay.
Right, as a way of doing it. Because the really key thing, I think, in data is there's certain kinds of data that are generally pretty innocuous and you can't get ambushed by, and there's other kinds of data that you can get ambushed by. And so, like, for example, one of the reasons why I think location will be one of the interesting questions of, are we trading around a person's location? You better be really careful about that, because that's something that actually can lead to something that's bad for the person.
So does that mean that the Google-style web where everyone gets the same everyone can access the same information is going away? Do you think now everything will be under more privacy layers?
Well, I think it's blended. Again, it's open and closed. So I think you're going to have a number of very tightly controlled data sets. we already have that, credit card numbers, passwords, right? I mean, it's not like this is new, that there is some really tightly held data sets. And then there will be fairly open data sets. And so what I think actually these apps will be based on is some combination, not all of them. And so, Google obviously, because you're trying to provide an open public search, wants all the data to be open to that. And a lot of the data should be open to that, and that's good, because an open public search is a good thing. But sometimes actually certain kinds of data shouldn't be open to just general public search.
Mm-hmm. And there's more and more of that kind of data being expressed.
Well, almost certainly, because part of the thing, like with what happens with Web 2, is a whole bunch of data about how I navigate my life. And some of that data is perfectly fine. Like, for example, what movies do I like? Or for example, part of the reason one of the features we offer at LinkedIn is an ability to make your profile public to Google is, well, if you're Googling my name, I want you to find my professional identity. But there's a bunch of other data, like, so for example, who do I know? Like, who are my friends, right? That I actually may want to hold more closely.
Right. We've seen some companies be very, very precious about that particular type of data. Yeah. Well, you've been involved in a lot of companies that, through your investments, through LinkedIn, that provide networks and platforms for data. Is there any opportunity to do this in a more decentralized way where a user is empowered?
Well, the hope is that most of the thing is the compact of users. You should only ask users for data when you're giving them something specific and valuable for that. So, for example, we don't ask gender at LinkedIn because we don't have a specific value proposition that we're giving you for that piece of data, even though it would be useful for us to know it, right? And so I think a general principle is only ask for the data when you actually have something that you believe you can provide as a value proposition to the user. Now, the challenge is that when you begin to get to these general services that think, okay, this will be like my data portal to everything, what's my value proposition that I'm getting to that? Your average consumer doesn't go, I wake up in the morning going, I'm going to spend an hour controlling my data on the web. That's not usually that's not a mass market consumer value proposition.
Mm-hmm. So the network gives it value.
Yeah, and so you have to do it through a loop where the person's going, oh, that's really, really valuable. I mean, for example, take services like Mint, right? So it says, okay, well, I'm going to give you all my financial information. If you said, hey, there's a service that you're going to give all your financial information to, the general answer would be run in terror, right? No way. But then you say, well, by the way, if you do that, then we're providing analytics about where you can cut your spending, where there's an ability to save money that you didn't have previously, where you fit in kind of and relative to other people and what your expenditure patterns are. It's like, oh, actually, that might be really valuable to me, and that might be essential for me to save enough money for the future. And so now I'm interested in doing that. And so again, the general just put this data in, not that interesting. This value proposition, I get what you're using with the data for. Okay, that works.
Mm-hmm. So you're a very active investor. I don't know, how active are you?
Fairly active.
How many? So you're at Greylock now, and you have a specific early stage fund there. And how many investments have you done in that now?
So the Discovery Fund has made 24 investments for kind of its design on the kind of angel seed level, and I myself have done 5 venture investments.
Okay. So how many of those companies would you say fit into this Web 3.0 as data thesis?
Well, it's interesting. I think all of them will ultimately do so, because I do think that what's happening is at least new features, if not the whole company, will be based off the massive amount of data that's coming in, and that will be part of what will be generative of these new ways of helping us navigate the world. They all fit in the everybody is going to be online. Everyone's going to be online by their real identity, and we're going to be transacting with each other as a function of that. So
you're not a chat roulette investor.
No, I'm not a chat roulette investor, although I'm not throwing chat roulette under the bus, okay. Right? But the whole thesis, part of Web 2.0 is, for example, Airbnb is one of my investments, and the notion that essentially enable a peer-to-peer marketplace by which people can let, a room, an apartment, a castle by the night, and that you can have an efficient marketplace that allows people a much better sorting between essentially host and traveler to find the right kinds of unique experiences. That sort of thing, I think, is the kind of thing that's sale. But then there will be and it's funny, I haven't even really thought about the Airbnb. I'm sure there's actually really interesting data patterns. The trivial ones, the ones that I always start with, you see this in Amazon, a bunch of other things, collaborative filtering. If you liked X, Y, and Z, maybe you're going to like, ABC as well. But then there might also be, actually, apartments, like for example, let's say you mashed up the locations where you'd rented and you discover that, you like apartments that are near water. Well, then that may change a search algorithm, right? And use that as kind of a way of feeding back information, because you can use a map, together with your rental history to actually, make predictions. Anyway, there's a bunch of, I think all of them will be developing interesting features off data as the platform.
All right, thank you.
Cool. Thanks.